Oh, it was worse. I was interviewed by David Schuster last night, MSNBC host. Oh, he was doing it was the same type of line. Well, yeah, well, I know where you get your money from. But thank you, I appreciate it.
Jennifer Wagner, Civil Electric Cooperative.
Oh,
Nice to meet you. We really
Nice to
enjoyed
meet
your
you.
discussion tonight.
Well, thank you so much. Even though I called for deregulation, you like my talk.
Well, I don't necessarily support that perspective, but the idea that it's just big monopoly utility and that other businesses can't compete, if that were the case, cooperatives would not be in
And that's the thing. We can disagree on finer points without it becoming name-calling and accusing people of lying and all that. Well, thank you for being here.
I just wanted to meet you.
Well, thank you. I wanted to meet you. How about that? And I wanted to meet you. So, thank you.
Hi, Sue Smith. I drove all the way over from Lake Wales. I was on the conference call a couple weeks ago, and I tried to ask a question, and they said it wasn't really a policy question, but then since then I got my answer. My next-door neighbor last year went full-blown solar power. Now, her house is twice as big as mine. It cost her $27,000 to install all the stuff on her roof. It cost her $27,000 to make the conversion. She got an 80% subsidy and tax break. $22,500 she got back in rebates, in subsidies, in tax incentives, and tax breaks. 80%. And this is what makes my blood boil is, first of all, she lives in a house twice the size of my house. She didn't need the subsidy to begin with because of her financial situation. And then I find out she's a screaming liberal later on and, is all boasting all about this. And in the meantime here, I'm trying to negotiate my power usage so I'm not slammed with a $300 a month bill. And then I find out that she gets $22,500 taxpayer money. And it's the 30% is like, it's much bigger than that. And this is stuff that she told me.
And that's one of the problems, one of the many, is that who are benefiting from the subsidies? They're the people who have the most money to begin with.
Yeah.
And I hope that solar power will be cost competitive, cost superior. I hope it happens tomorrow, but I don't want to pay for it when it's not the case. I don't want to pay for it if it was the case.
I know, and I don't want to subsidize my neighbor's power when I can barely afford to air condition my house to begin with.
Well, you know what? There's a solution. You claim her lanai. You pay for it. The lanai pool. It's yours now.
Yeah.
Put up a sign. It's Susan's.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
Diana with AFP.
Diane, I appreciate it. I appreciate you
The call
saying
was
that.
one for a couple of minutes.
Thank you so much.
I recognize her. Have a good
Hold
night.
on. She was here first, but yes.
I'm leaving you. I'm Alex.
Oh, hey, Alex.
When you have a later time later on, next week, the week after, we'll talk.
Oh, it'd be a pleasure. Thank you. And I'm not sure who was here first, but I saw you both
I
coming
have
up.
a simple question.
Sure.
Was there anything you wanted to say that you didn't get to say?
About 100 things.
Like, what was the most important thing to you that you wanted to say that you didn't get to say?
I guess I'd like to explain a little bit further about the extent to which the solar power industry fights against free market values in every legislature, in the Congress, in governors' mansions, in town hall meetings. And then this is a solar power effort. This is what it is. And when they then try to appeal to free market grassroots groups such as ours and say, this is about expanding free markets and extolling the virtues of free markets, I'm asking, where's that talk? Where's that rhetoric the 99.99% of the time when I'm meeting with them in other places? So I'd just like to see them be consistent. And it just doesn't strike me as right that you can claim to be supporting free markets, opening up free markets, when every time I come across these folks, no matter where it is, not only do they oppose free markets, they ridicule free markets. They ridicule the people who support free markets. They're not our friends. I wish they were. They're not.
But if, I think you made that point. I mean, I got that from you and what you said. But the question that's in my mind is if somebody isn't supporting what I support, but then on a certain issue they do support it, should I take what that seems to me to say, okay, well, on this issue, they do support it. Maybe I should back that.
Yeah, and that can be the case. And that's why we always have to look at the issues first and foremost. And I think the issues here are clear. The way the constitutional amendment is written, it says solar power and solar power alone can sell power from these small scale facilities. It's not a single issue constitutional ballot problem. You can say anyone can sell, that is a single issue. You can say any utility can sell, that's a single issue. And I don't like to impugn motives or whatever else, but that's when I just have a difficult time believing that anyone can make that argument and truly believe what they're saying. I mean, that's a slam dunk.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was actually my question at the end on the financial impact, because part of the constitutional amendment, there has to be a financial impact statement provided. So I don't think you can just say, well, we haven't done this before, so we can't.
And I think the biggest financial impact would be if anybody in the state takes advantage of what this constitutional amendment would put into place, and therefore purchases solar power directly from solar power providers, our tax bills go up. That's a financial impact. We're paying the 30% federal subsidy. Any program that's specifically being given to that provider, for example, under the $100 million in HB 7117, that's a huge financial impact. Go ahead.
Is there also some impact, because I cannot believe that there's not some impact to the infrastructure, the power grid. That's a cost as well.
He pointed that
Right.
out.
And also another point that I didn't make, just time being what it is. If you have people who are getting these subsidized solar power pieces on their property, adjacent to their property, buying directly from the solar power provider, the rest of us who don't have, who either on principle don't want to fleece our neighbors through the subsidies and make them pay for our power, or who realize that still it's hugely expensive, it's a scam, for lack of a better word. We have to pay for the upkeep of the grid for 100% of our power. Folks who are now getting their solar power directly from the solar power providers, selling it back at a profit, we have to pay, one, the higher rates to buy back that power, and two, they're not supporting the grid to the extent we are. We all have to support the grid, and that's another thing that shifts costs from the lower income people to the higher income people, to the people who can afford the subsidies and the equipment.
And I think that needs to be emphasized more.
I will try. Next time I will demand 40 minutes.
Well, I'm just always looking at the cost of it, because it's those little details that get us 5-10 years down the road, right? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your question. I appreciate it.
The best argument was that the prices went up in Georgia. They did try it.
Yeah. More than double the pace of Florida prices.
And usually if somebody's going to call somebody else a liar, it's because they themselves are a liar.
Maybe so, unfortunately, but yes.
That's human nature.
Yeah, but thank you.
I can see how you were upset when you heard the invective going back and forth about, you calling you a liar, or people, the motives of the Heartland Institute and all things like that. Well, you need to take that thought and that attack that you felt on your industry and realize how it was for proponents of this industry to see AFP using exactly the same ad hominem straw man attacks on what this amendment was about. You got to see, you got to put yourself in somebody else's shoes here. When I read AFP's attack on this solar ballot initiative, it was an attack on the motives of the people behind it. It was an attack on solar industry and all these other things. An attempt to cast them in the same boat with people from California, frankly, I've never heard of. And, you got to focus on the issue. And the issue is specifically this: the deregulation of power production here in Florida. Is this a chink in the armor? Yes. Solar power is a chink in the armor because it has broad public support. Will I be satisfied once we get deregulated in respect to solar industry? No, I won't. I'll be, going after small-scale hydro. I'll be going after small-scale wind power or whatever.
Well, I don't agree with the assertion that it is a chink in the armor of monopolies. I think it entrenches it further. But I do think that your point is well taken about look at everybody, the rhetoric, where it's being launched from, how it's being effectuated. When I did my research, I came across, I see the handouts. There are no handouts here that are calling out Floridians for solar choice and calling them liars, but there are handouts that are calling AFP liars and the Koch brother liars. That's what I see. I see, when I show up and I get an unsolicited email from somebody who I've never even spoken with.
Anytime I see somebody attacking the Koch brothers, I generally throw that out. But when I do see that the issues itself are not addressed, and it's a shifting into arguments that aren't really
Did
there.
I address the issues tonight, I hope? So at least I could address that question of yours?
You spent a lot of time criticizing solar power. When solar power, it has technological shortcomings, which I think are being addressed as the technology is rolled out and improved. But that really shouldn't be the issue. The issue is how do we deregulate power in Florida? This is one good place to start. I wish.
I think you just read the language that says deregulate the power industry. Boom. There you go. There's your solution.
Have you? That didn't get asked of it. Why not deregulate?
Well, I think if this ballot initiative fails, then we should try another one next time around, which does deregulate. And I would be just as much in support of that as I am of this one. Because I didn't start this ballot initiative. I'm in support of it, but I'm not driving this particular bus. But I know a good thing when I see it.
Well, I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah.
And feel free to send me an email.
Okay.
In the constitutional amendment process, you have to have now in the state of Florida, you have to have the financial impact statement. So, that has to be done at some point before you put it on the ballot. So that's what I was trying to get to, because what is that financial impact? And
my point in issuing my statement for making sure is that right now, the financial impact statement, and I can get you what you need, but what I was really trying to make sure was getting out here is, what was really ridiculous to me is anybody who reads the amendment can see that there's nothing that says mandate, there's nothing that says subsidy, there's nothing that says that. And when people say, well, solar's only survivability rate is through subsidies, look, that's nothing the amendment says. There's nothing in it that says that. My point of saying what a financial impact would be is to make sure people understand that we don't really know what solar will do in a free market. But I can get you information on any kind of financial stuff. But for the audience, I want to make sure that they read and understand there is no subsidy in this amendment. The Wall Street Journal looked at this and did an article on it. You've got the Liberty First Network have done an article on this. You've got the AP, you got Tampa Bay Times, CNBC, one of the top investment firms in the nation has looked at this. Hillsdale College's economics chair looked at this.
so, but let me ask the question again, back to the cost of it. What does it do to the infrastructure?
There has been, here's how this works. The utility companies right now will argue that this makes a impact on its infrastructure, and they've never issued any actual viable proof that shows this will have an impact on the infrastructure.
Will that have to be done in any way moving forward on this amendment?
What will they have to show? I would hope they show. I would hope they would show what they think would be an impact, but that is an argument they're using as fear tactics. It's a fear tactic argument to say that, the grid will go down. They've used that in Georgia. And look, utility companies, especially with what was said, that why doesn't the amendment say that other people can also sell? Utilities can sell energy. The people who can't sell energy is solar. Why would I say that a utility can also be guaranteed the right to sell? They do sell it. Utility-size solar right now, FP&L, do participate in installing utility-size solar. They're doing it. They're doing it in North Carolina. You've got Georgia Power doing it in Georgia. In Florida, you got FP&L participating in utility-size solar. They're already selling solar. They're already doing it. Who can't? Small business solar owners. Medium-sized business solar owners can't sell their own energy.
Do you have any questions about that?
Well, the point is that solar is subsidized nationally. This will essentially create or mandate that there will be a bigger market for them to sell to. More subsidized solar panels, and they'll continue to be subsidized at a bigger national subsidy for all of us, that all of us will pay for.
Well,
and so that's one aspect. So it just creates a bigger subsidy for everybody that we all have to pay, whether or not we choose to take advantage of solar or not. and there's very debatable about the effectiveness of solar. Number two is once that is there and it's installed, then it becomes a new entitlement for the small, so-called small solar power generators, that they'll continue to solicit the government for more subsidies for covering operating costs or future distribution of their power back into the grid, and then there becomes additional engineering costs to enable that.
Okay, so let me start with the first. Right now, if anything that we do within the energy industry, all the energy industries, nuclear right now receives 4 times the amount of subsidies that solar does. But we don't stop nuclear from participating in the free market. We don't stop natural gas and oil from participating in the free market. If the federal government decides to pass a subsidized law, I can't micromanage that. The point is that why not allow an industry to survive on its own within the free market? We don't go around and say we're going to prevent an industry from succeeding.
My point is that solar doesn't support itself in the free market because
it's not being allowed to
continue to be subsidized.
It's not being allowed to support itself.
But until it's not subsidy free, why are we promoting more solar?
Well,
because the more we promote solar, the more subsidies we will be promoting.
Well, the more that we allow power plants to continue building new power plants, the more that we're subsidizing utility monopolies. I mean, here's the point.
Well,
the point is that the solar 30%, that's what everybody's talking about, this 30% tax credit. That's what the subsidy is. That goes away in December of 2016. That goes away. And the only way that it doesn't go away is if we believe that the Republican Congress in the House and the Senate is going to not let it go away.
Well, we'll see.
But here's the thing.
We have our suspicions.
Right now, food is subsidized, big ag is subsidized, everybody's subsidized. Why would we outlaw an industry because someone's going to make an argument that potentially down the road someone will continue to subsidize something maybe? It's not my job to micromanage what a legislature or Congress does. It's our job to fight subsidies. I'm against subsidies across the board. And I hope that the individuals who are coming out and saying that they don't support this also open up and say, we support ending all subsidies across the board for every industry. However, just because somebody, a legislator, a congressman, a senator is going to promote a subsidy doesn't mean I'm going to outlaw an industry from being able to succeed in the free market. But I do support outlawing and reducing subsidies across the board for all the industries. And I hope everybody else supports that. But I also support opening up the free market and allowing industries to succeed or fail based on whether or not people want them. Simple supply and demand.
Can I ask you one question I forgot to ask you earlier? So Amendment 1...
Can I get my soda?
Yes.
Choice.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be able to drink that soda. That's good.
I asked them a bunch of questions earlier. I wish I had them on camera.
Anyway, but no, I ran into some hardcore libertarians.
Okay, so Amendment 1 supporters are now saying that the legislature is not enacting the amendment as they intended it to be enacted. So we're probably going to go to court with what were the true intentions of Amendment 1. Why is it you believe that we won't pass this amendment and then SACE, Greenpeace, Sierra Club, and all of the left groups who want some subsidies and mandates don't come back and do the exact same thing with your amendment?
Well, the amendment's designed to be self-enacting, which means the legislature doesn't have any power over enacting it or not. The amendment, because it's a free market, commerce-oriented amendment, we already practice commerce in the state of Florida. You and I already exchange money for services and goods, which means...
Let me steal the language here. So it's self-enacting. So the language that we've discussed as questionable, encourage and promote.
Read the second sentence, please.
This section is intended to accomplish this purpose by limiting or preventing regulatory and economic barriers that discourage the supply. Wait for it. But keep going. Barriers include rates, service, territory regulations imposed by state and local governments. Who is not going to say that when we're talking about these barriers, there are rate barriers because there are not subsidies for there are not subsidies and mandates. So who's not? So you're saying there are subsidies and mandates for all other types of electric in the state of Florida right now, right?
Industry in general is subsidized across the board.
So
nuclear is subsidized, oil and gas is subsidized.
So to make a level playing field in your mind, wouldn't that mean we have to then subsidize and mandate solar if you want it to be equal?
I didn't say I wanted to be equal. I said I wanted the market to determine whether or not something will succeed or fail. It's not my right to determine what is something that's equal. That's very socialistic language. I don't have any intention of making something equal based on any law. I allow the free market. The intent of that, that is an absolute outright lie. That is an outright lie of what that says. That exactly says everything that is right there. This section is intended to accomplish this purpose by limiting and preventing regulatory and economic barriers. If the first sentence, which says Florida shall encourage and promote, was followed by a second sentence that says the intent is to make sure that solar is selected over all other industry, then you have a point. But this says very simply what the first sentence is exactly intended to do, which is to remove barriers and regulatory barriers in the state of Florida. Right now, solar is outlawed as commerce being conducted in the state of Florida. This is simply saying that right now we will no longer make it illegal. This has nothing to do with subsidizing.
So you're not worried about the same thing that's happening with Amendment 1 happening here? You think
there's no comparison to Amendment 1 and this amendment. The Amendment 1 was about shifting dollars from one account to something else. Amendment 1 was allowing the legislature to determine what it felt was right in enacting Amendment 1. This has nothing to do with the legislature enacting it. We already conduct commerce. You already walk into a Starbucks or walk into a Home Depot and buy a product. You already exchange money for a product. A company already produces a product. You're already conducting commerce. All this does is say, welcome solar to being able to have commerce conducted within the free market. I'm not worried about the legislature doing anything more than they already could do. Anything that everybody says is an objection to why we should allow the free market can already be done by the legislature. The current legislature right now can pass $1 billion subsidy for nuclear, for oil, for gas, for solar. They can do it in 2016, they can do it in 2017, they can do it in 2019. It's our job to fight our legislatures from putting subsidies that artificially inflate one industry over another. But it's also our job to make sure that our legislature and make sure that we get to allow industry to succeed or fail based on the merits with which that industry is conducting itself in. And that's what this amendment does. It allows the free market to take place.
Okay, so you are you're just not worried about that first sentence and the way it's phrased.
How is this even an argument? I mean, and it's so frustrating to see this. An argument that a first sentence, which is defined in the second sentence, which is legalese language, which is following the way that constitutional law is enacted within the state of Florida. How is that an argument? And I mean, there wasn't enough rebuttal time up there, but anybody, and it absolutely, and I put it on video, I've said it publicly, it is an absolute outright lie to say that this amendment creates subsidies, mandates, or allows anything. The Wall Street Journal has looked at this, the Tampa Bay Times, AP, the Liberty First Network has looked at this. This has been out there for over 3 months. No one other than Heartland Institute and AFP and if you want to talk about who's funding who, and who gets their money from,
me, and I still
I don't get paid a salary from the solar industry or have a solar client. And I gave you an answer 4 times in the exact same way that it is. Sentence 2 explains exactly what sentence 1 is.
And again.